This has been an ongoing situation, an ongoing conversation with our friends from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Will Associate Counsel Lauren Gruel. No, it's not Gruel. How do you say it again, Lauren?
Royal.
Groyle. Gosh, one of these days, I guess we'll just have to talk a lot more, and then I'll get it right. But Lauren Groyle
Yes.
from
Yes.
Will, and you've joined me in the past, as has your client, who is a Milwaukee parent, who has children in the Milwaukee Public Schools. But give us a brief synopsis of from the beginning of the story to where we're at today.
Absolutely. So back in June of 2023, there was a law that was passed that allowed Milwaukee County and the City of Milwaukee to raise its sales tax because the city was on the brink of bankruptcy and they couldn't pay out emergency services pensions. So in a deal with the legislature and the governor and the City of Milwaukee, they all agreed that Milwaukee could raise its sales tax, but in exchange, there would need to be some improvements in Milwaukee. There would need to be increased safety measures. So that law was passed, like I said, in June of 2023, and it gave Milwaukee Public Schools until January 1st, 2024, to put 24 school resource officers in schools. And school resource officers are just police officers that are assigned to be at Milwaukee Public Schools full-time. And January 1st came and went, and, we always hope that MPS is doing what it's supposed to be doing and trying to follow the law, but it became clear in July of 2024 that that actually wasn't the case when the vice president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors laughed at not following the requirement at a newsmaker luncheon. And at that point, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty became in contact with our client, Charlene Abogren, like, as you said, is a mother of 6. She has a child in MPS right now. And we sent a letter to MPS and we said, hey, you need to be following this requirement. It is the law. You are legally required to have these school resource officers in schools. And unfortunately, Charlene's children, who are students at MPS, have witnessed and experienced violence that could have been deterred from having SROs at schools, or at the very least, better handled. Not to mention, MPS is calling the Milwaukee Police Department over 3,000 times a school year. That's about 17 times a day for Milwaukee police officers to come to school. So it's not like the police officers aren't already there. It's just that there aren't regularly assigned police officers to MPS, and therefore these police officers have to go off of their normal beat and respond to MPS situations. It creates longer response times. And it's different. It can be different officers every time. It creates a whole host of other issues. So we sent this letter to MPS. They ignored it until after we filed our lawsuit. So Charlene and the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty filed a lawsuit on October 8th, 2024. We were trying to get what's called a writ of mandamus, which is a fancy legal way of saying we are trying to get the court to compel public officers, in this case the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, to do what they are legally required to do and follow the law. We had our first hearing. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Mike.
go
Sorry.
ahead. No, you just took a pause, so I wanted to dive right in. But keep going.
Just really quick. So on January 23rd, we had our first hearing. And during that first hearing, the judge found that the Milwaukee Board of School Directors wasn't following the law and issued an alternative writ of mandamus and said you have to have school resource officers in schools by February 17th, 2025. And he also joined the city. The city and MPS came back on February 17th, 2025, and they still didn't have SROs in schools. So the judge ordered a 50-50 apportionment of costs to pay for the SROs, 50% to the City of Milwaukee, 50% to the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, and said, okay, now you have until February 27th to get SROs in schools. We came back on February 27th, and they still didn't have SROs in schools, and this time it was primarily because the city decided that it wanted to post job postings for these SROs. They booked meetings with the Common Council after the deadline, and ultimately the judge found the City of Milwaukee in contempt for not following the law and not following his order, and issued a $1,000 fine a day until they have SROs in schools. That fine is paused until March 15th if they can fulfill all the requirements that he set forth, and that's three main things. One, that the Common Council votes to approve the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and MPS. Two, that they have 25 school resource officers named and what schools they will be attending, and that's submitted to the court, and that those 25 school resource officers either have gone through the National Association of School Resource Officer training as required by statute, or they are enrolled and will imminently be doing that training. So that's where we are.
So, Lauren, I mean, do you have any inkling as to what the motive of those that are involved in ignoring these judges' orders? What's their? I mean, is it just to spite all involved and say, we don't have to comply because, frankly, it just seems as if there's no accountability whatsoever.
Right. I mean, it's speculation on my part, but I do think that there's a couple things at play here. One of the things is money. And money shouldn't be a factor here because both the city with the increased sales tax and MPS with their massive referendum, millions and millions of dollars, they have the money to make this happen, but they want to squabble over who's going to pay for what when it's really pennies on a dollar of their overall budget, right? So that's one part. And then this other part, and this is what Vice President Gokul Gandhi said at this newsmaker luncheon over the summer in 2024, MPS is really focused on restorative justice. They don't want officers in schools, despite the fact many, many communities across the state of Wisconsin have school resource officers in schools, and there are tons of benefits to having school resource officers in schools. So those are the two main issues I see as to why they're dragging their feet, but at the end of the day, it's the law. It's legally required. There's not a whole lot that our legislature and our governor agrees on, but our legislature passed this law and our governor signed it into law, and they want MPS to be safer. They want the kids in MPS to be safer.
Has the governor commented on this ongoing saga at all?
Yes, actually, and he said on more than one occasion that MPS and the city need to get it done. They need to get it done. Unfortunately, there isn't an enforcement mechanism in the statute, right? So we had to file this lawsuit, or MPS would just continue to not follow the law indefinitely.
What if the governor sent in the National Guard? Could he do that?
Theoretically, I think he could do that. I think at the end of the day, it's important for MPS to follow the law the way that they're supposed to.
Imagine the pressure they'd feel if he sent in the National Guard and how it would make headlines. I mean, if he were really serious, he just strikes me, just looking at him, he strikes me as such a tough guy. But if he were really serious, he could do something like this, and this would, maybe this is the solution. I think the only way that we're going to see any kind of change is when we have a new governor in 2026, and I would like to hope that a Republican candidate would capitalize on this issue, use this as an example of how weak leadership leads to this type of unaccountability among those in Milwaukee, or non-accountability, right. Whatever the word is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very frustrating that there's a group of people in MPS, the Board of School Directors, who just think that following the law is optional, and that it takes a courageous mother to bring a lawsuit on behalf of her children to ensure the safety of her children to get anything done. And really, it seems like the only steps that have been taken after the $1,000 a day fine that the judge had to impose to get these two entities to actually follow the law.
It's got to be maddening for your client, this mom, because as I recall, when she was a guest along with you in a previous episode, um, she stated, if I remember correctly, two of her children had been physically assaulted in the Milwaukee public schools, and I mean, what she would like to see, I would imagine, is that I don't know if both of those children are still in the Milwaukee public schools. Maybe one has graduated, but what she would like to see, or she would like to prevent, is other moms, other parents, and their children from having to go through what she has had to endure and her kids have had to endure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the goal. And as I stated already, many schools across the state have school resource officers in schools. This isn't some target at MPS because they're quote unquote bad kids. They're not bad kids. They're kids who want to focus on their education and get an education. But the board of school directors is focused on politics and what looks good for the Democratic Party, just candidly. And to them, that's restorative justice. They don't want officers in schools. And so all of those students are now at a disadvantage because they have to witness violence and be worried about violence, experience violence, and not have the community, the good relationship with officers that other students across the state of Wisconsin have.
And it's so unfortunate, Lauren, because I think about how challenging it is, even in our community, to identify and find good candidates to run for local office. And this is an example of how essentially the Milwaukee School Board, I don't know, maybe there's another term for it in Milwaukee, but how they've just sort of been left. And there aren't enough citizens that are paying attention to this to want to run for office and make a difference and actually best represent the kids as opposed to playing politics, which is what is going on with this current school board.
Absolutely. And I do know there are a couple of school board elections for MPS specifically that are coming up on April 1st. So it's so important that people keep an eye on local elections. I know it can be a little tricky because these are nonpartisan elections. So it requires a little bit of research to figure out, who is representing what values, because you don't have the typical R and the typical D that you usually do. But it's still really important to get out and vote because a difference in leadership is really what's going to make changes at MPS.
Yeah, well, and all around. I mean, going back to the governor too, but 17 times a day, on average, the Milwaukee public schools are calling the Milwaukee Police Department. That's unacceptable. And I would like to hope that the taxpayers in Milwaukee, if they were more aware of the situation that's going on in the schools, that they would demand accountability and they would demand change. And it's too bad that this isn't all over the Milwaukee Journal, but it doesn't suit their narrative. So I doubt that it will be covered as it should be.
Right. Well, and think about this. Every time those officers have to respond and go to MPS, they're off of their normal route in the city. And the city has its own problems with crime, right? And the cities, the taxpayers, the community members in MPS are less safe as a result of MPS being called and not having designated officers at the school district, right? So it's the community, too, that's being put at risk.
Governor Evers, play some hardball. Send in the National Guard and see if that makes a difference. That's my solution anyway. Well, thank you, Lauren Groyle. I appreciate you joining me this morning with the update. And, of course, we'll have you back as the situation is fluid, I guess, at this point.
Yes, thanks for having me, Meg.
Thank you.